Welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon for the session Hunting for Artifacts, 19th Century German Explorers in the Luzon Cordillera. For this talk, our speakers will tell the story of how 19th century German explorers in the Cordillera collected an astounding number of artifacts and specimens now stored in 5 museums: Dresden, Leipzig, Frankfurt, Berlin, and Vienna. So our speakers for this talk are Analyn, Salvador-Amores, and Claudius Kamps. So allow me to introduce to you, share with you a little bit about our speakers. Analyn Salvador-Amores is professor of anthropology and former director of the Museo Cordillera, the ethnographic museum of the University of the Philippines, Baguio. Her research interests include anthropology of the body, non-Western aesthetics, material culture, endangered cultures, ethnographic museums, indigenous peoples, and colonial photography in the Cordillera region in the Philippines. She studied anthropology at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Her MPhil and DPhil in social and cultural anthropology at Oxford University through a Ford Foundation International Fellowships program. Her recognitions include one of the outstanding Filipinos by the Metrobank Foundation in 2015 and outstanding young scientists in the field of anthropology by the National Academy of Science and Technology in 2014. Claudius Kamps, born in 1963 in Willich-Anrath, Germany, he studied ethnology at the Georg August Universität in Göttingen, but after completing his vocational training as a state-certified museum and exhibition technician in 2005, Mr. Kamps was employed at the Ethnologisches Museum Berlin as collection manager responsible for the branches of South and Southeast Asia and East and North Asia. During his employment, he had 2 sabbaticals with extensive travels in Asia. He visited Museo Cordillera in UP Baguio and other places of the Philippines in March 2023. Lastly, Dr. Christopher Kast is a historian specializing in late medieval papal history and colonial collections. He earned his PhD in history from Ludwig Maximilians Universität in Munich in 2021. He has held positions at the Bavarian and Berlin Brandenburg Academies of Sciences, the Rosenheim Municipal Archives, and at LMU Munich. His work has been supported by fellowships from Stanford University, the German Historical Institute in Rome, and the Austrian Historical Institute. He currently leads a digital research project on the colonial collection of Heinrich Rothdauscher, investigating the provenance of Philippine artifacts in a German museum. Before we continue, I would just like to say tell our foreign guests that there's an audio device for simultaneous translations here on our left side. So welcome, and then I hand over to our speakers.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Also, I would like to introduce Sir Ricky Jose from the National Historical Commission of the Philippines as a reactor for this panel. So, esteemed guests, friends, and colleagues, organizers of the Frankfurt Book Fair, and to our senator who's not around, she was here earlier. Thank you for coming here to the launch of the Hunting for Artifacts, 19th century German explorers in the Luzon Cordillera, edited by Professor Delphine Tolentino. This is the photograph of Professor Delphine in December 2024 when we first received the proofs of the book. And the book was launched in Museo Cordillera in April 30, 2025. And that was the last time we saw him because of his untimely passing. So we also would like to recognize his contribution to the book. Meantime, as he said, we should bring the book to Frankfurt in spirit, and we celebrate this book for this special occasion where the Philippines is the guest of honor. Before I begin, I would like to give thanks, gratitude to the individuals and the institutions who believed in this project. For instance, the Office of Senator Lauren Legarda, the Department of Foreign Affairs, they have the Cultural Diplomacy Program, and of course the Embassy in Germany and the consulates in Germany as well. The Goethe Institute in Manila, University of the Philippines in Baguio, also the Cordillera Study Center, who is the publisher of this book. And this book is in cooperation with the 5 museums in Berlin, in Dresden, in Leipzig, in Munich, and in Vienna. So this book has 6 chapters from the German curators in 5 museums and in the Philippines, including a part 2 of the book, which is a catalog of the selected artifacts from their respective museums. They are all digitally repatriated and photos that were returned back to the communities of origin in northern Luzon. So this morning we have Claudius to talk about the collections at the Berlin Museum as well as the collector, and also Dr. Kast is here to talk about Henry Rodauscher and his collections on the Philippines. So in 2016, the research project called Understanding the Igorot Life World from the ethnographic collections of the early German travelers was conceived from a call to action by former Philippine ambassador to Germany, Delia Albert. She said that there are many unexplored northern Luzon collections stored in the basements and storage facilities in German museums. As such, for this project, we looked at 5 museums in Berlin, in Dresden, in Leipzig, Munich, and Vienna. We also included Frankfurt Museum of World Cultures and their connections with German travelers and the substantial collection of ethnographic collections from northern Luzon. When I met her, she reiterated that Filipino scholars should seriously examine this, as there were no experts in Philippine culture in Germany, particularly on the material culture of northern Luzon. William Henry Scott, historian, wrote in 1974 the same title, German Travelers on the Cordillera, and translated the German text to English, but the stories about this collection on material culture were not mentioned at all. Piqued by this interest, I also asked what happened to the Igorot artifacts collected in the 1880s and brought to Europe by these German collectors. After 150 years, what happened to these collections? Are they still there? Are they still using it? Or are they just languishing in the storage facilities? Examples of these German travelers include Alexander Schadenberg. This is a photograph of the mummification process in Benguet, which he documented. There are photos of the different travelers on the Cordillera, including Anna Schadenberg, who's the wife of Alexander Schadenberg, and they created a community there of German expats, in Ilocos. So they collected massive ethnographic artifacts, such as these ones from Berlin, photographs from the Alexander Schadenberg collection, including field notes, diaries, and others. Now, worthy of investigation is the field notes of Hans Meyer from Leipzig. And in fact, this is, what I'm wearing now is the tattoo-inspired barong from these drawings of Hans Meyer. And accordingly, he said that in every household in Bauco Mountain Province, he would see at least one tattooed person in every household in that particular province. So this full body tattoos is very prominent and widespread in that area. So here you can see this old drawings, 150 years ago, and this barong, tattoo-inspired, which are considered as cultural reference from the past to the present. So the documentation produced by the 19th century German visitors demonstrates a wide range of interest, from geological and social formations to geography and biology, signifying the scientific bent of these explorers. German visitors were, after all, interested not only in recording strange customs and practices, but also in documenting and collecting objects of the everyday life in native communities, such as this ones. They collected a lot of pipes, the anthropomorphic carvings, such as the bulol, wooden spoons, and this actually is a scraper, coconut scraper. Specifically, the project sought to clarify what happened to the Igorot artifacts collected and brought to Europe by German visitors. As the project strived to establish, in this volume now tries to show, it is a curious tale of how various objects from sedentary societies transformed into mobile artifacts with the rise of new epistemological projects in the 19th century, when Europe, animated by its discoveries, sought to understand its difference from the far-flung societies it had colonized. Based on the historical accounts and archival records, we retraced the communities that they went. This is the old map of produced by from Ferdinand Blumentritt, the best friend of Jose Rizal in Germany. And we retraced where they actually went, where these German travelers went. And through provenance research, we identified the objects where they came from and went back to the archives again. So these are the questions now for this particular book. What lessons can we learn from these objects, and how are these important in the contemporary period and in the Philippines? How have these collections of material culture, historical information, and archival photographs defined Igorot identity in the earlier period? Alternatively, how do the century-old ethnographic records vary from the people's own accounting of their material culture in the contemporary period? Ultimately, these are the questions that matters most. In Berlin, Mr. Claudius Kamps, the collections manager of South and Southeast Asian collection in the Berlin Ethnological Museum, collaborated with us on this project. Dr. Platz, former curator of the collection, said that our visit was the first time that some of the cabinets on the Northern Luzon collections were opened after the war. They were treated with harmful chemicals, and such it was not advisable to open it for a long time for fear of exposure to these chemicals. However, I insisted and signed the waiver that any harmful effects caused by the chemicals was not the museum's responsibility. In other words, view and handle the artifacts at your own risk. So this is the storage room in the Berlin Ethnological Museum. So Baguio-based photographer Eliza Consul and I continued to survey and document the many ethnographic artifacts from off-site storage facilities. And the list of objects are really overwhelming, but we have to continue the documentation within the 2-month period. In Dresden, given the limited time and overwhelming number of artifacts, we thought it was a mission impossible for a 2-man team traveling around Germany. But the curators of each museums were very considerate. We stayed up to 10 o'clock in the evening and stayed in their facilities, and they were very, very enthusiastic opening these cabinets to Filipino scholars like us. So at night, while I examined the artifacts, I felt that the artifacts spoke and asked me, what took you so long? Why now? No? So we felt that we have to document because we believe in the spirit of objects, the agency of objects. They fear that they might languish in the storage facilities and not be able to activate their qualities, their qualities, no, outside of the archives or in the museums. So as you can see, these objects are in pristine condition. We also encountered this card catalogs with intricate drawings, no, of these various artifacts introduced by Petra Martin. So these objects did not only include only objects of the everyday, it also included this textiles, various textiles, weaving implements associated with some photographs in the collection by Alexander Schadenberg. There are also brass ornaments, miniature models of houses and other architectural details in the collection, and many more. Now, in the Leipzig Museum, we were also assisted by Dieter Grudman, the curator of Southeast Asian collections, also showed us the field notes of Hans Meyer. And as you can see, they are meticulously written with local names of each of the objects. And in the museum, nobody reads local terms. So when I saw the list, Eureka, it's all written in the local language. And we can actually identify the objects associated, the local terms associated with the artifacts that they have collected. By the end of this, so in Vienna, the Ethnographic Museum in Vienna, we are also assisted by Reidman Blumer, who is the curator for the Southeast Asian collections. They brought us to a basement where all of these beautiful textiles are found. And I almost fainted and cried when I saw this. It's no longer made in the communities where we visited, but this pristine collection is the craftsmanship, unbelievable, awesome, no? So, ang galing ng Pilipino. So these are the collections that we found there, and this area in the Vienna Museum, the textile collection, should be carefully studied, no, by other scholars. So this is an Apayao belt, which we can no longer see in northern Luzon. And of course, the famous 2-inch tall anito from the Kankanai group, and also this, we call it Lingling O, with a snake design in Kankanai, Benguet. No? So these are actually, if you go to the villages, you cannot find this anymore. You can only find that in Vienna. And even brass pipes from the Benguet area in, let's say, in Lepanto area. So by the end of almost 2-month journey, we were able to document a significant number of almost 1,000 objects from the various museums. But there are more collections like the Visayas collections, the Mindanao collections, the Jose Rizal collections, and a lot more. No? So I hope this book will inspire other scholars to look at these collections in these museums. So we returned all of these digitized images back to the communities, and the reactions were varied from different communities. They were surprised, they were shocked, they were confused, and most of all, they were very proud that these collections are in the German museums. So we showed them images of the collection. They also identified these objects. We also showed the card catalogs. We also did rematriation. Rematriation meaning you have to deconstruct the object, replicate that, and understand the technological process of these particular objects. So we found basket weavers, cultural bearers who are making this adornment still and other utilitarian objects in the different communities in the Cordillera region. So today, this book comes into full circle from northern Luzon to Germany and back again. So we are happy that this mobile artifacts have made this today in the Frankfurt Book Fair. So this book is a contribution to the re-evaluation and recuperation of Cordillera artifacts stored away from the homeland, a task that must now be pursued by native scholars and their colleagues in the West, working in a spirit of cooperation, guided by historical knowledge and informed by plural perspectives. Thank you. So,
I will try to pick up where Ikin left off, and I will try to introduce you to a colonial collection today stored in the Museum Fünf Kontinente in Munich. And this colonial collection was assembled by a German pharmacist named Heinrich Rotauscher, who spent roughly 10 years between 1873 and 1883 working in different drugstores in Manila, in Vigan, and in Cebu. And during his time in the Philippines, he managed to assemble a rich collection of objects, most of them from the Philippine Cordilleras. And I would like to highlight in my talk 3 aspects regarding this collection. I will show that the assembly of the collection can meticulously be traced by written sources, especially by an autobiography and several letters that Heinrich Rotauscher sent to friends and family. I will secondly show that the written sources prove colonial and violent appropriation. And I will thirdly show that Heinrich Rotauscher profited immensely from the existing colonial structures and that he acquired several objects with the help of Spanish colonial officers. At the age of only 22, soon after passing his state examinations at the University of Munich, Heinrich Rotauscher was offered a position in the Philippines, a position to work at the drugstore of the German Paul Sartorius. He was a merchant from Hamburg. Initially, Heinrich Rotauscher worked in Manila, but after 3 years of training, he moved to Vigan, where he managed another drugstore of Paul Sartorius, only to end up in 1879 opening an own drugstore in Cebu. I want to point out that German pharmacists were well established in the Philippines since the mid-19th century. They were the main suppliers for the Spanish colonial government, supplying them with medicines, of course, but more importantly, with luxury goods imported from the United States or from Europe. And the establishment of German tradesmen and businessmen was the result of the growing colonial ambitions of the German Empire in Southeast Asia that coincided with the opening of the Suez Canal, of course, in 1869, or liberal Spanish trade policies. And therefore, it is actually not surprising that we can find a big German community in the Philippines, even though the Philippines were obviously under Spanish colonial rule. Heinrich Rotauscher ran his drugstore until 1883, and he left the Philippines and returned to Germany, bringing with him over 100 objects. These 112 objects, to be correct, were donated to the Royal Ethnographic Museum in Munich, today Museum Fünf Kontinente, in 1893. And as you can see, the collection consists of weapons, utilitarian objects, clothing, ornaments, and most prominently here on the left side, a finely carved ancestor figure of outstanding cultural and historical significance. Regarding the Philippines and the Museum Fünf Kontinente, it's one of the museum's oldest collections and one of the best collections that they have. However, the need for research regarding colonial appropriation is considerable, as written sources that are part of a private collection indicate. We are talking about several written sources, namely various notebooks with sketches, diaries, letters, and an unpublished autobiography, as well as several photographs that we have. And especially in his autobiography, Heinrich Rotauscher outlines his years in the Philippines framed as a colonial adventure story, something that probably resonated very well with contemporary taste, you could say, especially in post-imperial Germany, since ethnological travelogues and colonial narratives were enjoyed by a broad public. It is crucial to highlight that two versions of this autobiography exist, a long version written in 1923 and a long version in 1923 and a shortened version from 1932. And this fact is very important since in the short version from 1932, all critical aspects regarding the colonial appropriation, violence, and other facts that he wasn't proud of were completely deleted. So you can say that this editorial process suggests that Heinrich Rotauscher himself realized that some of his actions could in retrospect be regarded at least as questionable, and that's why he deleted these passages. Missing in the short version, but most prominently in the longer version, is a trip to the Cordillera in 1878, during which he obtained some of the artifacts of his collection. And while he acquired some of those objects by bargaining with the indigenous peoples, by, as he describes, gift giving, the greater part of the artifacts were received through the mediation of Spanish colonial officers, as we can see in the case of this prominent ancestral figure. This ancestral figure was a gift to Heinrich Rotauscher by a Spanish colonial officer who stole it from an Igorot family while the father of the household was absent. And although Heinrich Rotauscher notes in his autobiography that these kinds of artifacts are considered sacred by the indigenous peoples, and that the head of the family subsequently carried out a ritual cleansing of the object, he does not consider the theft unjust. Instead, immediately following this account, he refers to regular punitive expeditions by the Spanish in this region, as part of which such gifts, the ancestral figures, were more than welcome to him. But why did the Spanish actually give these kind of gifts to Heinrich Rotauscher? And the answer to that question is his knowledge of chemical methods. He assisted the Spanish with the processing of fine gold by not only providing them with the chemicals necessary for that process, but also by delivering detailed instructions on how to separate the gold from other metals. In this particular case, in exchange for his knowledge, he also received 4 ancestral figures, probably tiny ancestral figures, as Ikin already showed you, in gold. And he describes vividly in his autobiography that a Spanish colonial officer had a member of the Igorot imprisoned until he surrendered the figures, since the indigenous peoples usually refuse to let go of them voluntarily. So you can say Heinrich Rotauscher himself probably considers his actions as an act of preserving cultural heritage, as he describes it in his autobiography. And in his opinion, for the greater good, he also took acts of violence into account to achieve that goal. As I come to an end with my presentation, I would like to highlight once again that the collection is embedded in a context of violence and was assembled under asymmetrical conditions of powers, as these written sources that I presented to you clearly indicate. German activities strongly complemented rather than competed with those of other colonial powers in the Philippines. as the case of Heinrich Rotauscher and his collection shows very, very vividly. And finally, and this is important, in this case, the need for research regarding the colonial appropriation is evident and very important, and we will be addressing that issue in a research project that has only recently started, exactly 2 weeks ago, where we will try to bring together German and Filipino scholars to do provenance research on that, and also we will try to bring together the scholars and culturalist bearers from the communities in order to create open dialogue on the future of this collection in Munich.
Hello. Hello. Yeah, my name is Claudius Kamps. I'm working at the Berlin Ethnographic Museum, Ethnological Museum. And if you might have recognized in my bio note what was written, I'm not an academic. I have been for a long time at Göttingen University studying ethnology, but never passed my exams. And finally got a technician of museums and exhibitions. With that diploma, I got that position there in Berlin as a study collection manager. That time when Ikin attended at museum at Berlin to start a research, there was the curator, Dr. Roland Platz, which I worked together with intense. And he took me together, he took me also to that talks and about the plan, making plans about this research program. And we both had the idea to make an article. Even it's usually not my task to write articles. I'm concerned with the practical tasks in the collection. And Roland was going to write an article about Kempermann, also an 19th century collector who left a diary or travelogue something, a manuscript that was in Roland's hand. And I should have done something, an overview over the collection, what's present still now. And during the work, it turned out that the handwriting of Kempermann was not illegible, not readable. So this plan failed, and there was no article, and it was just me finally to contribute here. In fact, as Akin mentioned already, there was not worked on that Philippine collection for a long time, maybe up to 1980s or 90s. There were some pieces exhibited in the public exhibitions, but most of the Berlin collection is kept in a storage room. And even there is not it was not worked on that piece of the collection. The fields are much too huge, like South and Southeast Asia, just one curator for this huge area. Anyway, they pick out one certain point of interest, and it was not Philippines that time. So there was, before a long time, no research on the Philippine collection. And there was also no clear actual inventory. So how much of the firstly primary listed objects still are present in the collection after Second World War? After all this time, what was damaged, what is lost, what is stolen was not clear that time. And so for this research, I tried to get an overview on the hand of the archive material, the catalogs, and the file cards, which are kept together with the collection. Yeah, what was I going on then? There was, for me, it was kind of motivation when Professor Salvador-Amores said to me, yeah, this is the only way. Please, Mr. Kamps, do something, publish something, write that article, because this is the only possibility for the indigenous people, for the origin, the people of origin, to get access to the collection. Since the storage rooms are quite closed, hermetical, closed, one have to apply. The process is like that aside from the public exhibitions now in Humboldt Forum, the castle, and where, to get access to the storage rooms, one have to apply at the curator and have to make a deal with the curator. And the curator will ask you what interest you have in that, what you are interested in. So you have to name something, but that means you know already what is in there. You have to name, I like to see these figures, or I like to see the cloth, the textiles, something, jewelry. Yeah? You have to know already. You cannot say, I just want to take a look. He will say, we don't have time for that. We need a serious interest. So I tried to give a small insight in my article by what people can imagine what's to find there, and to have an idea what they can ask for. I gave a very brief overview over some of the important collectors, like von Landau, Schadenberg I mentioned, I think different ones. There are many collectors. Some of them, there are only 2 or 3 pieces. Some of them have bigger collections, like Hans Meyer. I choose some importance one, what I thought, and try to cover the field. So, and give some clues what to ask for, where further research might be done. Okay, that's what I like to say for that. Yeah. I choose also 5 or 6 slides for this presentation. And first you saw the former big entrance, very first, the big entrance when the museum had still the exhibitions in Dahlem, the public exhibitions that moved then to the center of the city, to the castle, and remained, the storage remained in this building, very unpopular and very difficult to find. Then there's the storage, hermetically closed. Even you need the access, then the curator can make an appointment, say, Mr. Kamps, please make an appointment, pick the people up there and bring them in. Inside, then, it starts to be interesting. All South and Southeast Asia, you see left side, the wardrobes are, or the collections organized by geographical means. That means every country or what have its wardrobes. And in these departments, let's say, there is a subject name, like a clothing, weapon, shoes, tools, something like that. This is a general organization. And so you can find in that big storage, you can find the Philippine artifacts in 2 or 3 places. And I pretend this is a very nice way. It's called study collection. It's a middle way between clearly conserving means of storing and the public exhibition. It is not public, but it's not completely closed. One can move through, and it's also not harmed by the chemicals, what Professor, as long as the wardrobes are closed. This pesticides against insect and that is not the general air. As long as the wardrobes are not opened, we can have an overview over all that artifacts, short overview from Southeast Asia, hold there without the masks and gloves, just if we walk on it. And this is the final destination where the collection is going to, if the interests of the curators and interested people who are interested in the objects and in the comparison and that is not followed, it's going to this direction, that it's completely clean and natural. There's just access by the database. You can watch thousands of pictures in the database and choose one or two, and there will be a crypticized number, say B4EG room number 2008, level 5, wardrobe 90, shelf 12, to find this one object then there between all others from all over the world. You never have these things next to each other again and get an overview just by viewing through the glass. You have to apply. You will have future. This is future, especially for Southeast Asia there in Berlin. But the future goes there that you have to apply for exactly one or two. If you ask for 50 objects, they will say no more than 20 is not possible. Which 20? Like that, it is going. The future of the museum.
Hello. Thank you. So this is an important publication, I think, and Filipinos, we welcome this kind of publication, and I hope there will be much more of this publication of the diaspora of Philippine objects outside the Philippines. We know very little about art history, ethnographic art history, and this kind of publication will help us to understand better the ethnography of the Philippines. Having said that, we should also compare the collections of Philippine art in other countries and also publish them. So I worked with Spanish collections of Philippine objects in 1992, 30 years ago. And like you, I felt like crying and kneeling in front of the objects because they were so precious and so rare. And I knew that most Filipinos were not aware of the artistry of these objects. So we should do a lot of comparison of the art objects in these collections and have continuities and so forth. I'd like to say that in the we talk about rematriation, which is the production of understanding of the production of these art objects. For example, the anthropologist in Madrid, Pilar Romero de Tejada, wrote an article about these bulols, the wooden sculptures of religious sculptures. It seems that those that are in the European collections are smooth and well-defined with the features, and some are really more exotic looking than what we have in the Philippines. So Pilar Romero de Tejada proposes that the objects that are in Europe were commissioned by the collectors, or the Ifugaos, for example. They realized that the finer objects are more financially viable than the rough objects that are used in the houses. So in effect, the objects, a lot of the wooden objects that we see here could be the first in a series of tourist art. Therefore, we should also be questioning how household useful were the spoons and forks that are staple collections all over the European collections. So we do the ethnography in Cordillera. How did they have the spoons and forks also in the households? That's one. and also how many objects, how well represented are they in other collections. Let's talk about Cordillera collections in St. Petersburg, Russia, collected by Roy Barton. There's also a Cordillera collection in the National Museum in Copenhagen. There's also, of course, the ones in Michigan. So they're all over the world, and these are the ones that are well known. Therefore, hopefully, the younger scholars will take over and have the same fire and really sign waivers to forge into the collections. Those are basically my points. This is an important book. We have a few copies here. Let's not have the author take home any copies back to the Philippines. They should all be purchased here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Ricky. Thank you, Dr. Salvador-Amores, Mr. Claudius Kamps, and Dr. Christopher Kast. We now open the floor for questions.
Thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. I knew there were a lot of explorers from other country acquiring objects. I didn't realize it was so sizable that came back to Germany. Anyway, Dr. Amores, you mentioned that there's also a Rizal collection. Could you tell us more about that? Which museums are these in Germany? And has there been a lot of research into the so-called Rizal collection? What do these comprise of? Are these artifacts? Are these wildlife? What are they?
Okay, the first time that we went to the Berlin Museum, Mr. Kamps, Claudius, presented that as the Rizal collection first. And there were textiles, there were head ornaments, barong, piña, raw materials, and I think, ropes, abaca fibers, everything. So, and then when we went to Dresden, there are more collections, the ones that he donated in Dresden. And then when I went to Leipzig, there are also other collections from Jose Rizal. So what is he doing in these museums? Why was he donating artifacts representative of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao? Always, Luzon for the bulol item artifacts, Visayas for the piña, barong, and Mindanao for some textiles coming from different regions. And then you wonder the size. So according to some accounts, the sisters, I think, sent some artifacts that can contain in a shoebox, and they can send it to Berlin. And with our research, Jose Rizal also went to the Royal Association of Anthropologists in Berlin. So he was talking to Theodor Hagor and other prominent anthropologists during that time. And he said that maybe he got the idea, maybe I should donate some relevant representative artifacts from the Philippines. So there are a list of that. It's with me if you're interested. And somebody should do research on the Jose Rizal collection because I cannot handle Northern Luzon already. Somebody has to do Mindanao. And it's all over to the museums that he went. I knew he surveyed the collection, and if there is a gap on, let's say there's a missing collection from the Philippines, he would fill that in with spoons or hats or abaca fiber, a wallet from Visayas, etc. So very interesting collection. It also the variety in the collection.
No one has written it up.
There's one, Petra Martin from the Dresden Museum. He wrote a brief overview of what they have in Dresden, but it's written in German. So somebody has to translate that in English or in Filipino to access. So the problem really is access to these materials. We know that they are there, but it's written in a foreign language that, Filipinos should have access to it. So, yeah.
There was now access from the National Museum Manila There was now access from the National Museum Manila to Berlin collection, this Rizal collection in Berlin. And it was more for documentation. I don't know how much they will research, analyze that, but there will be an exhibition, online exhibition, I think in December, launched on the homepage of the National Museum about this Rizal collection in Berlin.
We have one more question from... yeah.
Thank you very much for your talk. My name is Stephanie from Studio Filipino, and we're doing research actually in Switzerland in the Völkerkundemuseum on Philippine objects as well. And my question is, there was a recent study for Switzerland that there are a lot of human remains in ethnographic museums.
Human remains?
Human
Yeah.
remains. And I was wondering if you also have found any human remains during your research?
Yes, a lot. Yes, in the collection there are. So just in the, is Vanessa here? No. Just yesterday we went to the Frankfurt Museum of World Cultures, and I just had goosebumps because they were showing Philippine collections, and suddenly there's a human remain in there. It's like treated as an object. I had goosebumps because you have to respect that. They should be separated from the object collections because these are human remains. And I've seen others in different museums, and until now they don't know how to deal with it, whether they would repatriate that back or would they stay in the museum, because these are looted. Well, you see that it's a kind of colonial violence also, collecting the coffins and the human remains at the same time, and then they are stored in the storage areas for a long time, like frozen bone. I've seen that in Dresden. It's a confidential, you cannot access that. But if you want to see it, then you can actually have a look at that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our speakers for this illuminating discussion. We will be having a special performance by Akayu, Kalinga Bamboo Music. So thank you once again and have a good afternoon.